Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.
How can adhering to traditional roles negatively impact the modern couple? It's time for another conversation. This is Making It Last podcast, and I'm your host, Noreen Daly. And with me this time around is Janelle Hay. Newlywed, recently married. I don't even think it's it's not even 2 months yet. So, I mean, she's literally fresh off the block. And Juliet, you've been married for how long now?
About 8 years.
About 8 years. So, yes. All right. So, we have Juliet Poyser and Janelle Hay who will be talking to us about this issue. So, who would like to pipe in first?
Okay, so you mentioned about the traditional roles or what society deems is fit for a man to do as opposed to what a woman should do and the negative effects of that. Well,
hold on, before we get into that, let's set a context. For somebody who's listening who's saying, but haven't those traditional roles evolved? What would we classify as the traditional roles now for male and female?
Have they evolved? Really? Not necessarily, because we still expect the woman to be the home keeper, to do the washing, the cooking, the cleaning. And we still expect the husband to be the one who supports the family financially, and that's just his role. Financial support and
provider.
Outside work.
All right. Juliet?
I mean, I agree. I think a lot of it has to do with the man being the provider and the woman staying at home. Obviously, today that doesn't happen anymore because I think the economy is designed to require that both work outside the home.
But what's interesting though is that even though the economy is set up in that way, and both individuals or both persons in the relationship have to be working, we still expect, or society still expects, that the woman should stand most of the home work.
Okay, yeah. The home duties, the domestic duties.
Yes. Okay. I agree.
And that, I feel, puts a lot of pressure because not only does she have to perform in the workspace that she's in, but she's expected to perform perfectly as a wife without receiving much help doing home duties. And it's really, really, really unfair, the weight that is placed on a woman.
Yes, and more so in this culture, particularly because it is, where in other cultures you might have a dad staying at home and that is acceptable. Particularly here, even if the man, say, for example, can cook, he is not expected to. He still expects that even though he's worked 8 hours, his wife's worked 8 hours, when he gets home, the meal should be there and ready.
Even if it is that he reaches home before the wife reaches home.
I see that you're already delving into it, but go right ahead.
I'm not even going to go into that because I remember driving around the block a few times. Like, where are you? I'm out shopping. Oh, he says, are you home? Not yet. Take that where you will. But I was not going to get home first that day.
No, so how can this then negatively impact the modern couple who is not, ascribing to these traditional roles?
Well, I think that because it's not deemed traditional, those looking from the outside in are going to have this kind of screw face.
Okay.
Can this really work? Is this really working? Trying to judge it based on their perception of what it is a couple should do. And if it is that you're not careful, a lot of times their perception can really feed into your relationship and have you second guessing what it is you established as comfortable in your relationship. So you've agreed that this is comfortable for us, but because society or your friends or your family thinks that this is not traditional, you might want to say, am I really doing the right thing?
You want to give us an example of that?
Well, my family is not necessarily the type to say that this is how things are supposed to be, because I think I've made it clear to them the kind of person that I am. But for others who might not know Rashane and I well, they might say, okay, he's doing the cooking and the washing, and you are doing the cleaning and the ironing. Why aren't you cooking? Why aren't you washing? Isn't it the wife's duty to ensure that her husband gets a good meal? But we've already established the fact that he is better in the kitchen at most things, and he doesn't want me to wash the clothes. So I'm not going to wash the clothes because he said no. And I love to iron and I love to clean. So I don't have a problem doing those things. So it's what's comfortable with our relationship. So when it is that they're going to say that it might not work or it's not healthy, when it comes down to it, we both are in the relationship and it's what we are comfortable with that's going to help our relationship to really flourish.
But there's another side to that I think that we don't often think about, and is that is the impact it has on the next generation. So, for example, when you have children, you know, and what you described sounds fair enough, and you know, not too complicated. But there are other relationships that people have out there that are a little bit more complicated, and it's a little bit difficult for the children to figure out what their roles are as they grow up, and so it does affect the next generation. And then taking it outside of Jamaica. Well, maybe not necessarily, but you look at 300 years of slavery, where the woman the woman was put above the man for 300 years, and it's still a situation that exists today, where I believe women are more educated and they're pushed in that direction than men, and certainly in other societies where the men are persecuted. In other words, a guy driving down the street may get stopped, but a woman, a black male, for example, driving down the street may get stopped, but a black female may not get stopped by the cops, because the cops over generations in the past were taken care of, breastfed, they cooked for, cleaned, so they were used to the black female being in authority, and so I remember being stopped, and there was a young male in the car, and he says, "Oh, you know, be careful, make sure you're calm." And so when he pulled up, I said, "So, hey, what's going on? Why are you stopping me?" And the guy's elbowing me. You can't talk to him like that. Because he says, "Ma'am, I was just telling you, I just want to tell you your lights are going dim, and then you might need to change it soon." I was like, "Oh, thank you." Because he'd been stopped so many times, and it was negative, the outcome. He was afraid, because that is the way that, see, a male white man is not threatened by a black woman, but they are threatened by black men. So in other words, the role in some of these societies is that women are the ones that carry the burden. They're the ones that go to school, and they're the ones that are leading out in the family. And it's very difficult in those societies to well, I wouldn't say the new role of the women being the ones that are educated and leading out in the family has negatively impacted those families. Okay. So there are some societies where there are some issues with that.
Okay. How then can we counteract these effects, though? Or is that possible?
It's difficult. I told somebody a story that I heard, and I can't even tell you the source, but it was an experiment they did where they got these fleas and they put them in a glass and they put a plastic cover over the top of it, and so the fleas would try to fly up and they couldn't get past that. So they learned not to do that anymore. Well, what they did is they removed that generation that had the experience, and that had that particular experience, and the next generation never flew out of the glass, because they learned from their parents that not to try. Another example is a woman. She said she always cut the legs off the chicken or the turkey, and when she's baking it, and somebody said, "But why do you do that?" She said, "My grandmother did that. My mother did that, and my grandmother did that." She asked her grandmother, "Well, why did you do that?" She said, "I had a small pan." So she has a huge pan, but she's still cutting it off because
That's
so
what she saw.
so it really tells you the impact or the negative impact that these things can have on you and for generations, and we just don't know why we do what we do. Yeah.
I think how I can apply this is when Rashane and I were in counseling, one of the activities that we had to do was he had to write down a list of all the things that his family is accustomed to doing, and I had to do the same. And what we were encouraged to do was to select those things that we want or we want to see in our children, and we need to start practicing from now. So
Nice.
we went through and we saw a lot of things that we didn't like when in our families, and we saw a lot of things that we really, really appreciated, and we've started to do some of these things. And to be honest, you kind of are grooming yourself and the generation to come, because whatever you practice now, that's what they'll be seeing. And not only your generation to come, but others around you, because when they see that there is an outside of the box experience, you don't have to be boxed in by what society says. There are other ways of working around certain things to the benefit of you as a couple. Then I think that this will help to change the mindset or the current mindset of society.
Yeah. Well, so you use the example of counseling really making a difference and changing you. But we're in an academic environment, and so really studying and reading and just exploring different things is another way, in addition to counseling, that I think would help us. Certainly, you don't expect to come to to go to a university and leave there the same, and not expand and grow and open your eyes and be exposed to so many different thought pattern, philosophies and thoughts, and so yes.
So in wrapping up, how can adhering to traditional roles positively impact the modern couple?
Well, wow, that's a deep one. I want to say that the traditional family, certainly as outlined in Genesis, certainly leads to a society that is very positive and that grows, and the design that was put forth as to the role of the man in the family,
the priest of the house, exactly,
and the role of the woman. It leads to a society that is grounded, and certainly we've gotten away from that, far away. And I think the outcome in generations to come, I think we're beginning to see that is a complete change and turnaround in society that is not very, very positive at all. Yes.
So I think when you say traditional would more mean by God's standards, biblical standards,
yes.
Because as you mentioned before, if it is that we try to adhere to how God originally designed things to make the man be the priest, if the man is the priest of the home, then of course we're going to try or strive constantly to be closer drawn to God, because that's what the priest of the house is supposed to do. And once we are closer drawn to God, then we essentially are behaving the way God intended us to.
Yes.
And that's the whole plan of salvation. And that's how Christians, if it is that you're a Christian, that is how you are supposed to be seen in the world. You are the light of the world, and the world needs to see that light, especially now, and especially with the different things that are happening to emasculate men. And we see a very specific target on men. So, of course, there is an essential role that men are supposed to play in the family structure and essentially in the world at large.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
What are your final thoughts, ladies, as we're wrapping up? Is there anything, how can adhering to traditional roles, whether negatively or positively, impact the modern couple? One final thought that you'd like to share as we're wrapping up.
I just think that as a couple, you should try to work out your own happiness. Yes, there are certain influences that you'd want to seep into your relationship, but at the end of the day, try to do things that will make you comfortable as a couple and not anyone else, because at the end of the day, it's just you. It's not you, your husband, your wife, your husband, and your family member. It's just both of you. So do whatever it is that's going to make you comfortable.
Yes.
Juliet?
Well, I would like to add, you mentioned the man being the priest. And I want to say to the young people who are not married, you pick the priest. So it's up to you to find that godly person, that, because it's like going for a job. You go for the job interview, the boss is interviewing you, and you're evaluating that boss. Do I want this person to be my boss?
True.
Is really the question. So in as much as they decide whether or not they're going to accept you, you also have a decision to make in that relationship. So you are choosing who you will follow. And it goes that way in terms of a relationship, in terms of choosing a husband, and in terms of choosing who you're going to serve. Because even though there's a God, he says, you choose ye this day whom you will serve,
Always
is
have a
what
choice.
that prophet said. And the other point about a relationship is that when you are both putting God first, it's just amazing how well it works out. I mean, I am not going to go into the male gender right now. There's no time for that. But, somebody wrote a book, Men Are From Mars. I can't remember his name right now.
I'm reading
John
that
Gray.
book now.
John Gray, thank
And
you,
Women
wrote
Are
that
From
book.
Venus.
And just the title alone I found fascinating. But the fact of the matter is that we complement each other. And even though we focus on our differences, when it works the way God would have it to work, we literally complement each other. And when we put God first, then those differences really work out for our benefit, because they're his strengths and my weaknesses, they just fit right together if we work it out right and we do it right and we pray and ask God to help us to become one, because that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Then we can. Yes.
There you have it. This was Making It Last podcast, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, but with other people. Thank you, ladies. I'm Noreen Daly. Until next time.
Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.